Thank you, and I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker and my colleagues, this is an emergency situation, and it requires emergency action by the House of Representatives. The United States Senate, the other body, has acted and sent us S3743, which will allow us to expand some of the use of the funds that have been accumulated in the National Oil Spill Liability Trust Fund on an emergency basis. I'm pleased that the other body acted. This is a unique and very difficult situation dealing with a very unique and difficult national disaster. First, I would be remiss if I didn't remember today those families who will be in Washington visiting with President Obama. 11 individuals lost their life when the oil rig, the Horizon, exploded in April. I know the President will be meeting with them, and on behalf of all the members of Congress, we extend our condolences for that loss of life. Right now, we're dealing with the results of that disaster, and this disaster and explosion, sinking of the rig, and the uncontrolled oil spill. Fortunately, there's been some progress in that regard, but incredible amounts of oil has spilt into the Gulf and now endangers the shores of at least 4 of our states. In 1990, we set up a oil spill liability trust fund, and that was after the Exxon Valdez. That fund has in it $1.6 billion, a substantial amount of money. Now, that fund was not set up to relieve anyone of responsibility if they're negligent, and it was also not a fund to pay for cleanup costs that are clearly assigned, clearly identifiable. A lot of it was intended if there was what they call an orphan spill, or spill where you don't know where the oil came from, the polluting substance came from. Within that $1.6 billion trust fund for oil spills that we created, we have an emergency fund of $150 million that can be expended immediately. Now, what's taken place is that fund, the $150 million emergency dollars that can be spent. Right now, Thad Allen's doing a great job in leading the effort for the United States, and as you know, he just retired from the Coast Guard and doing a wonderful job, but he has the responsibility of reacting now and immediately. It took some time for the administration to get him in place and also to declare this a spill of national significance, but he's on the job and he needs the resources. Now, the resources are running out. We do have a letter which I'll submit to the record and to the Congress at this time. This is to the Speaker of the House, and it's from the Director of the Office of Management and Budget. And he says, all the costs of this fund also that is being expended at this point must be repaid, but at this current time, in just a matter of days, the emergency fund will run out. So we have documentation of the need from OMB. And just a few minutes ago, we received from the Federal On-Scene Coordinator the statement that their requirements to support the continuing ongoing effort will bring the emergency fund to a critically low level over the next 7 days. So we can't have the cleanup efforts come to a halt. We must act. Now, I saw the need for this yesterday and met with colleagues on my side of the aisle. We had a hearing in the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. Mr. Oberstar and I agree that we must act. The Senate has acted. We have before us S3743 this morning. Myself and other colleagues in Congress introduced H.R. 5499. That's mirror legislation. So both the Republican, Democrat, House, and Senate agree on the provisions of this legislation, which will allow in $100 million increments the expansion of the emergency fund. Now, let me make this very clear. The Oil Spill Emergency Trust Fund is not going to be a piggy bank for BP or other responsible parties. This money must, should, and will be repaid. This is only a temporary measure. It's only a temporary measure, too, because the money that they're repaying goes back into that larger fund, not into the emergency fund. And this legislation will correct, again, the inability of accessing the larger amount of money on a needed basis. So we've introduced mirror legislation today. This is a cooperative and bipartisan effort. However, this is a terrible disaster, and questions need to be raised about what's caused us to get to this situation. Quite frankly, I'm baffled by some of the administration's positions, both on deep water offshore drilling. In the beginning of this year, in February, we received the budget from the President of the United States and the administration. In this budget, they proposed cuts to the Coast Guard, more than 1,000 positions. They also proposed cuts to and decommissioning of some of the ships, the helicopters and planes that we see now involved in this very important mission. Not only did they propose cuts to the Coast Guard, our first responder, in February they also proposed cuts to the Department of Interior, and look this up if you will, the Minerals Management Bureau that's responsible for environmental reviews. Now this is what they proposed in February, and then in March they proposed expansion of drilling in the Gulf. The agency, again, that's responsible as a first responder, I remember Frank Lobiondo, the ranking Republican, and I sent out a press release when we read that about these cuts in the Coast Guard, and we said, this is a recipe for disaster. Fortunately, those cuts have not been enacted, and I believe even before this oil spill, there was bipartisan support not to enact those cuts that were recommended, and in light of the administration's policy to expand drilling in the Gulf. Some people say I've been too tough on the Obama administration. I think the Obama administration does have responsibility in this. They did issue the permit that allowed the drilling, and I have the one-page permit. Here's the one-page approval. April 6th, 2009, approval for deep water drilling at 5,000 feet. I have what I call deficient plan that they approved that was submitted by BP in March. So in less days than it took in some instances to approve now cleanup proposals, they rubber-stamped and gave carte blanche approval. Let me say that I also criticized the Bush administration, but I went back and looked at what the Bush administration did with the agency that was responsible for issuing these permits. This is a memorandum from the Office of Inspector General, and it's dated September 9th, 2008, during the Bush administration. And this is what the Bush administration did in that agency that issued this permit under this new administration. This memo conveys the results of 3 separate Office of Inspector General investigations into allegation against more than a dozen current and former minerals management employees. I went on to read what else the Bush administration did on this agency that was responsible for issuing these permits. Listen to this. Collectively, our recent work in the Minerals Management Agency has taken well over 2 years. They investigated these folks involved in countless, it also involved countless OIG, Office of Inspector General, Human Resources, an expenditure of nearly $5.3 million in OIG funds. 233 witnesses and subjects were interviewed, many of them multiple times, and roughly 470,000 pages of documents were reviewed, and people were prosecuted under the former administration in this agency. Now, the latest reports I have and I discussed yesterday at the hearing were that, in fact, we have reports of inspections by this agency, the Minerals Management Agency, inspection reports that were supposed to be done by these officers that were of that agency, federal agency, were actually penciled in, we believe, and those are the reports we have, by oil workers and then inked over by these folks. Now, it's nice for this administration to have spent time rewarding BP with safety awards in the prior year. It's nice for them to have a good working relationship with those folks that are responsible for issuing the permits. But I think we need to take a closer look at how we got ourselves into this situation. What brings us to this day when we've expended the emergency fund for cleanup and that we have to take an emergency step like this? Now, I support this measure, but I'm telling you, every penny needs to be paid back. This fund, this oil spill liability trust fund that was put in place shall not and cannot be used, as I said before, as a piggy bank for BP or any responsible parties. I'm finally told that I said, where is the money, where's the billing? In the private sector, if you have a bill due, you pay it. As of yesterday, the staff told me that BP has been billed $69 million, and as of yesterday, the information that we had is they hadn't paid the bill. If they'd paid the bill, we still probably would have to be here because of the terms of the current legislation to allow access to additional money. But that money needs to go back into the trust fund and be paid for by the responsible parties. I reserve the balance of my time.